I won't deny it, I'm a Southsider. You don't wanna mess with me. Got the police rushing at me, but they can't do nothing to an attorney. Said she won't deny it, she's a Southsider. You don't wanna mess with her. Got the police rushing at her, but they can't do nothing to the public defender.
That was great.
She ain't no pretender, she's a public defender. And you need her in your corner if you get in trouble. Hello, everyone out there. I'm Brian Tierney. This is the Blessed Life University podcast, the Blue Podcast for short. With me today is Claudia Bertacchi. Claudia is an attorney with the Cook County Public Defender's Office. She is currently assigned to the Felony Trial Division at the Layton Criminal Courthouse, or for all you Chicago people out there, 26 and Cal is what we call it. She represents people accused of serious crimes, and those people can get anywhere from 1 year to life in prison. She is also a certified catechist and has been teaching religious education for the past 10 years. We're here to talk about what's blessed, and part of that today is traffic stops. We have St. Patrick's Day coming up here. Today is Friday, March 4th. We're recording a little early. We're going to release this later. And, if you're lucky, you don't get pulled over. But sometimes you're unlucky. And hopefully you've been following your rules and minding your P's and Q's. And so we're going to talk about traffic stops, the law that covers them, and, some of the typical things that get you stopped, and the procedure of what happens when you're stopped, and the do's and don'ts, and all this stuff like this. So, Claudia, how are you?
I'm just lovely. On this lovely Friday evening, I'm great.
Well, thanks. And speaking of which, thank you very much for coming by. We're both busy people. You probably grinded today at work. I know I did. Lucky to get in a bite to eat before I came back here for the podcast and then setup time. So I don't know about you, but at my age, I'm ready to go home and friggin' lay down like a fat ass and friggin' watch some TV with the cats. So I was out. I went to get a bite to eat. I stopped at Hooters after this real estate closing I had, and I ordered 20 wings, but they only gave me 10. So I think that was the universe telling me 10 wings are good enough. You know what I mean? Don't overdo it. So it's all good. Dropped off some food with my mom. My wife's out watching the new Jackass movie with her family. So here we are. How about you? How was your day?
My day was good. I had court in the morning and court duties all day, right? So Fridays are always usually busy too at work.
Is that your busiest day?
No, actually, the day after a holiday is always the busiest day. So come Tuesday, because Monday's Pulaski Day, I just anticipate chaos. It always is.
And I'll bet you it's going to be pretty chaotic after St. Patrick's Day as well.
Yes.
Do you see a spike in traffic-related offenses after or during the St. Patrick's Day season?
Well, when I was assigned, first of all, before we start, so this conversation.
Legal advice.
Yes. You have two attorneys on this podcast. We have to give a disclaimer, right? So, although I'm going to be sharing my experience dealing with DUIs, this is not meant to constitute an attorney-client relationship. It's not meant to be legal advice in any way, shape, or form. It's just to talk about my experiences dealing with different DUI cases that have come my way.
So we'll talk about the law in general, but the facts and circumstances of each person's individual case vary.
Yes.
And so this is not intended to be used by people as legal advice. You have to talk to us outside of that, and even then, if you're talking to Claudia, well, you need a public defender. So not everybody gets a public defender. If you got dough, you got to pay your way.
Right.
Got to pay to play. And I don't handle traffic stop cases anyway, so it's all good. But
right.
So tell us about traffic stops. What's the law that applies and all this stuff?
Okay, well, the first thing to know is you actually can drink and drive, okay? You can drink and drive. You just cannot drink and drive above the legal limits. So the legal limit is 0.08. How do we measure that out? Well, honestly, it basically depends on the person. It depends on their height. It depends on their weight. male, female, empty stomach. So there's so many different factors, because one beer could get someone who is very petite above the legal limit, right? Whereas someone who's more heavy set can have perhaps even 3 beers and not be above the legal limit. So it really depends.
You're saying we should gain weight?
No, that's not what I'm saying. No. But, obviously it has to do with how your body metabolizes the alcohol as well. There really is no way, I guess, to measure it. You can't go out drinking and say, okay, well, you know what, if I have this many beers, I'll be totally fine, because you're also gambling with it. You really don't know what your alcohol level will measure at until it's actually measured, right? You can't just assume it in your head and try to do the calculation. That's not how it works.
Well, that's true. But I'll tell you what I saw recently. I was in the line at the pharmacy at Walgreens, and you can get one of those breathalyzers that you blow into. So for all you cautious drinkers out there, you either want to get an Uber, get a designated driver, or get one of those things you blow into and make sure that you're blowing under the legal limit so everybody else is safe out there. And keep yourself safe too.
Right. I didn't even know they sell those. They sell those
couldn't
at
believe
Walgreens
it.
now.
It was not even behind the counter. It was like on the shelf. So
that must be brand new then.
I guess so. You used to have to friggin' buy them on the internet, and the site was kind of half shady, and you weren't sure if it really worked or whatever. Was it calibrated properly or any of this bullshit? And so now they literally have it. I was in line and I'm waiting to go to pick up my prescription, and I seen it just out there, like right next to where you go to the person to pay. It was like on the shelving. You could pick one off, and they looked legit. I mean, for $50-$60 or whatever they were charging, they better be.
Okay, we'll get back to that point in a minute, because that'll actually tie in.
I was just kidding around. It was supposed to be funny.
Oh, that's actually not true?
Well, no, it's true. But I just added it in there. Like, you can literally get one of those breathalyzer things now at the pharmacy.
Okay.
All right. So we covered that, you can drink and drive. You just have to keep it under the legal limit, 0.08. And for some people, that might be 2 beers, but it all depends on the factors of weight, whether you've eaten, all this stuff. So what do we have? So what is the law that governs the traffic stops, and what are some of the common ones that you see? Okay,
so believe it or not, the most common ones that I've seen, at least, are not, this erratic driving where, a car's going 100 miles down the street and, crashing and whatnot. That's not your average DUI traffic stop, okay? Your average DUI traffic stop is something as silly as a broken taillight, okay? So now you have someone who's actually, driving within the speed limits in their lane, but their light is out, okay? So that is a valid stop, all right? As silly as it may seem, that's a valid stop. So now let's assume that's the reason for the stop, okay?
Right.
So you pull over, sirens go on, you pull over, and then you roll down your window, and now the officer smells alcohol on the person's breath, okay? So now there's probable cause to go further into the investigation, right? Okay, I smell alcohol, but is he or she impaired now? So then usually the officer would say, okay, sir, ma'am, have you been drinking? Okay, and believe it or not, 9 out of 10 times people actually do admit they've been drinking, okay? So they'll say, yes, I had a few beers, or had a couple shots, So for the most part, what I have seen actually is honesty, okay? So a lot of people are admitting to the police that they've been drinking, right? Now that right there starts technically a custodial interrogation, all right? And the officer does not have to give you Miranda warnings, even though they're asking you questions that obviously can incriminate yourself. At that point, they're just doing an investigation. It's an inquiry, if you will. But you're still not free to leave, okay? You can't take off running.
Because they need a reasonable amount of time to do their investigation.
Right, exactly. So you're not free to leave. So in all technicality, you are in custody because you're not free to leave.
Right.
So you don't have to answer the officer's questions, but by not answering them, that'll still probably get you arrested anyway. Just because you don't answer their questions doesn't mean you get a free pass either, right? Okay, so back to our example. So if the officer smells alcohol in their breath, okay, then usually they'll look into the person's eyes and now they see their bloodshot. Okay, well, that's another indication that someone's been drinking, right? But it could also mean so many different things. It can mean, somebody's so tired, right? They've worked a 12-hour shift and they just got off work and they're exhausted, right? So there's a variety of reasons why someone could have bloodshot eyes, not drinking or under any drugs or anything. But it is an indicator. The courts have ruled that it is an indicator. So then the officer can order the person to step out of the car, okay? So once they step out of the car, there's two things that can happen. The officer will ask a person, do you want to have a breathalyzer test? Okay, so that's what we talked about. The breathalyzer is literally where you blow into the device and it'll register your level, okay? Now, there have been some challenges to the breathalyzer itself because there's a very strict procedure that's in place for making sure the breathalyzer is properly working and functioning. But for the most part, it is very hard to challenge the breathalyzer, okay? The registry of the breathalyzer. It's very, very hard to challenge it, okay? Now, a lot of people also don't know this. You can deny to take a breathalyzer. You don't have to. Now, they'll probably still arrest you, but you have to weigh your options. If you don't take the breathalyzer test, then your license is automatically suspended for 1 entire year. If you do take the breathalyzer test, regardless if you're above the legal limit or not, your license is only suspended for 6 months, okay? But now, if you register above the legal limits, that's evidence that's going to be used against you in court, and that's going to be almost impossible to fight, okay? So now you are risking having that DUI on your record. So it really is a balance test. Are you okay with having your license suspended for a year? Or are you going to take the chance that that the breathalyzer registers higher than the legal limit and you almost most certainly will be found guilty of a DUI, right? So it really is a balance test. But again, the very minimum, it's 6 months you're going to be suspended regardless. So that's the first type of test.
The first type of field sobriety test is the breathalyzer?
Yes. So the officers will always ask that first, usually. Would you take the breathalyzer? Because if you're above the legal limit, case closed, you're going into custody. That's it. You're done, right? There's no more investigation. Now, if you refuse, okay, well, now the police have to inquire a little bit more, all right? So there's something called standard field sobriety tests, okay? And there's 3 common tests that you do. First is the walk and turn test. Okay, so basically you're walking in a straight line and then you have to do this turn and basically you can't wobble or anything. Now, if you're pigeon-toed, for example, that could be difficult for you. If you have balance issues, just in general, I know I do. I can't walk in a straight line sober, okay? If you've had just if you've had problems with your legs, any sort of condition. I mean, there could be a variety of reasons why someone can't walk in a straight line, right? However, that's an indicator. They've found that that's an indicator of whether someone's impaired or not. So that's the first one. Then another one is the one leg stand, okay, where you have to stand on one leg. Again, I have a hard time doing that.
That's a tough one. I
have no balance, okay? So if I were to get stopped and have to perform these tests and I have not been drinking, I probably would fail these tests. Okay, so I find these tests to be very problematic. Then they have what's called the Nystagmus Test, where basically you're just following along with the officer's finger
to see.
What do they
call that again?
Nystagmus.
How would you spell that? Nystag?
Nystag. You're putting me on the spot.
You didn't know it was going to be a spelling.
Right, yeah, thanks, Brian.
But I've never heard of that term, so I just wanted to.
Yes, it's where they basically it's to test out, you're testing out your pupils and seeing. You're right, that's exactly what it is.
Your ability to follow. Yeah.
Right, so those are the 3 most common ones that they do. Now, if you fail them, you're going into custody, okay? So even, let's just say for argument's sake, you had 1 beer, okay?
Right.
And let's just say maybe you are under the legal limit, but you didn't want to take the breathalyzer, and this officer determines, this person smells of alcohol, bloodshot eyes, and now they just fail the tests, you're going into custody. Okay, so it really is a judgment call, the officer's judgment call, right? Now, also your speech. Do you have slurred speech? Now, I've had clients that they have speech problems. So maybe they stutter when they speak, or they literally slur their words. Like, that's just the way they talk.
Which people might be more likely to do when, like, there's an authority figure present who's questioning them. Yeah.
Right. It could be you're nervous and you're just like, stuttering because, oh my God, I'm stopped by an officer, right? There's a variety of reasons why someone's speech can be slurred. But again, taken into consideration with, bloodshot eyes, smells of alcohol, slurred speech, now they failed this test, you're going into custody. Okay. Now, you can also decline the standard field sobriety tests, all right? So the officer will say, do you mind performing these series of tests? And you could say no. Okay, so now, if you decline both the standard field sobriety tests and the breathalyzer, it's going to be, the officer could still arrest you and probably will, all right? Again, it's up to the officer. It's going to be very hard to prove in court. Very hard, because all the officer is going to have to go by is slurred speech, bloodshot eyes, and you smell of alcohol. Okay? But that's not an indicator. I mean, what if you had a beer at, 8 in the morning and it's now 9 o'clock at night and it's just on your breath still, right? So maybe you'll still smell of that. Maybe you were working, again, the 12-hour shift or whatever, you're tired, now you have the bloodshot eyes, and then the speech thing, again, maybe that's how you talk. So it's a very strong trial. It'll be a very strong trial case if the state's attorney doesn't end up tossing it. But unfortunately, we don't see perfect triable cases like that. What we do see is cases where there's the field sobriety test, the standard field sobriety test, or there's the breathalyzer. So it leaves us with very limited options in terms of a good defense for the client.
So that we just kind of cover the different types of field sobriety tests.
Yes.
Before we move on to the topic, what is the next topic you got there?
Well, so that's assuming the stop is good to start with, okay? So the stop is actually good. Now, it is really hard to challenge a stop because, again, it comes down to, okay, who's more believable. Imagine there's no dash cam or anything, because a lot of departments don't have the dash cam running. Right. So if the officer says, okay, well, this person blew a stop sign, yeah, it's a violation. They can get pulled over. But in reality, if they didn't blow us, let's just say they really didn't blow the stop sign, well, then it's their word against the police officer's word, unfortunately, right? There's also really, I feel like, really fine lines. I've had clients pulled over because, the divider, or not the divider, the lines in the road. So if you go over your lane, slightly over your lane, that's another reason they could pull you over, right? Because you're swerving in and out of your lane, right? Okay. Now, we live in Chicago. Why on earth would anyone swerve out of their lane? What are we trying to avoid?
Potholes.
Yes, everywhere. I can't tell you how many times I'm driving down the street and I'm swerving left and right. I look like I'm driving impaired, but I'm not. I'm literally trying to avoid, the 10-foot potholes that are everywhere, right? So again, that's something an attorney would have to investigate. Okay, my client was pulled over, let's say because, they went out of their lane and the officer saw them swerving out of the lane. Okay, well, let's go back to the scene of where they were pulled over. Let's investigate the area. Are there potholes? Are there not potholes? Was it well lit? Are the paint stripes in the ground, is it visible? Because some streets, they need more paint on there because it's so old.
That's true.
Right. Was there snow? If there's snow, you can't see anything, obviously. So weather conditions definitely matter. Is it raining? How are the lighting conditions? All of that is relevant when it comes to a stop, a traffic stop.
Whether the stop was legitimate, whether it was valid, or basically whether there's a mitigating factor or defense that you might have, that, well, Your Honor, this is where he said he pulled me over. And if you look at the road here, I went and taken pictures of it. Got plenty of potholes leading up to that intersection or that red light there. or if it was snowing or something that day, or you can't see the lines, you know, it'd be hard for either person to say, whether it's the police officer or the accused, whether they were actually, you know, not using lane properly, or they were swerving over lines or whatever.
Right. Now, see, another thing I forgot to mention. So there's different parts of the statute, of the driving under the influence of alcohol statute, that you're charged with depending on what it is. So if you do the breathalyzer test, that's what we call an A1 DUI. If you don't do the breathalyzer and it's just a standard field sobriety test, that's an A2 DUI.
What's the difference?
So, well, the difference is the A1, you have the blow. Okay, the A2 is...
The evidence is stronger on A1, or the penalty?
Right, because you have the blow. You're above the legal limits.
Okay.
The A2, you have to show that there's bad driving, okay, that it impaired your ability to drive. So, for example, maybe you use that as a defense. No, judge, my client was not driving, was not impaired. Look at all these potholes on the road. The reason he swerved was to avoid, you know, these 10 potholes along the block. You know, so that's how you would challenge that type of DUI, the A2, to show that there was no bad driving.
So it's section A1 is for the breathalyzer, and then
Yes.
subsection A2 is for field
Yes.
sobriety. And then there's
Well,
any
well,
more?
for bad driving, yeah.
Or bad
Yeah.
driving, yeah.
To show the impaired driving.
Is there other sections below that, those couple, or no?
No, there is. So there's the A4, which has to deal with drugs. So you want me to segue into the drugs now too?
Well, we can hang on to that.
Okay, well,
for a
we'll
minute,
get
but
back to
yes,
that,
So
yes.
there's more sections
Yes.
under which you can be charged for impaired driving.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we got in a lot there, so we kind of start off. Perhaps you get pulled over for whatever reason. Maybe you're going a little too quick above the speed limit. They pull you over for that. Perhaps you were swerving to avoid something or whatever have you, or maybe you just have a taillight out. So we got a couple lessons right there. Number one, make sure that your lights are working properly on your vehicle, and don't give police officers a reason to pull you over. Now, Chicago police officers, well, they've got their hands pretty full with, you know, other things like violent crime and all this. And, you know, I'm guessing you're not as likely to get pulled over for a bad blinker in Chicago. You know, but in other areas, you're going to have to be a lot more careful. So make sure your lights are all in tip-top shape. If you don't know how to install your own, go stimulate the local economy and talk to your local mechanic shop. Shout out over there to my friend John's Service Center and Sam over there. They'll take care of you. They'll make sure you're all tip-top shape with your lights. And so you might get pulled over. If you get pulled over, you know, the job of the officer, as you mentioned, is to start investigating whether there's maybe criminal activity that's been going on. So what they're doing is they're gathering evidence that can be used against you in the court of law. So perhaps you start wondering, well, sir, you said you're pulling me over for a blinker, but now you're asking me questions about what I've been doing this evening. You know, I don't have time for, you know, discussion about what I did this evening. I really got to go to the bathroom. I got to get out of here. Are we good? Because if you need to give me a ticket for the blinker, like, let's get it over with, because otherwise I'm going to piss my pants. You know what I mean?
Right, and then they'll say, "Have you been drinking?" No, I haven't been drinking.
Had a bunch of water. I gotta go really bad.
Right, but it all comes down to if they have the suspicion that you are under the influence, then you can't leave, obviously. And that's another thing. Never flee the police. Even if you think you should not be pulled over, let's just imagine like you literally did nothing wrong. You didn't blow a stop sign. Your lights are working, everything. And if you get pulled over, or I'm sorry, the lights go on, you must pull over, okay? You cannot take off, because that in itself is another crime, you know, fleeing and eluding the police officer. So you always, always must stop for the police. You know, if it's a legal stop, we challenge it in court, but you never flee from the police.
You know, I've seen, even in my own experience with traffic stops, I had a friend who got pulled over on suspicion of driving impaired, and they had the lights on the whole time, which I think makes it harder to do field sobriety. So, you know, I know they got to leave their cherries on or whatever to let people passing by know that there's an emergency, but could they chill out with a goddamn floodlight? I mean, that shit's pretty blinding, you know what I mean? Like,
Right. But, so I'm glad you bring up about the different departments. Now, Yes, in the suburbs, there tends to be. I mean, when I was in the Maywood courthouse, there was a lot of DUIs. That was probably the number one most common crime, at least that I've seen in the misdemeanor world. Misdemeanor.
And so to clarify that for all the people listening, is that a DUI is a misdemeanor and not a felony.
No, sometimes.
Sometimes it's a felony.
So if it's your very first DUI, or second, and sometimes third, even although the third is usually a felony, but I've seen a third misdemeanor DUI. I don't know how that happened. But let's assume you have a valid driver's license and it's your first DUI. That's going to be a misdemeanor, okay? Now, if you were driving on a suspended license, and even if it's your first DUI, that's now a felony.
Because you have a suspended license and driving.
Because it's an aggravated DUI. What made it aggravating? You didn't have a valid driver's license. So that's the difference. That's how they distinguish the difference, okay? And for the most part, if it's like your third DUI, they could charge it as a felony as well. So who approves felonies? The state's attorney's office, not the police department. So it's always up to the discretion of the state's attorney.
Whether it's going to be a felony charge?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, there's some prosecutorial discretion there.
Yes. But, the statute does say that, if you don't have the license,
that's an automatic.
That's, yes.
Automatic felony for DUI with a suspended license.
Right.
Makes sense. That's two little bumps that you had in your road there, No valid license, and you're driving impaired too.
Right.
So you get pulled over. Perhaps the officer, notices the smell of alcohol. He or she believes they smell alcohol. Maybe they notice your eyes are red. So at that point, they start asking questions. Hey, it's kind of smell alcohol here. You've been drinking tonight? There's two paths that you can go down and they answer that question. The yes path or the no path. So if you go down the yes path, it seems like you've already incriminated yourself.
Right.
Or you've definitely given them the probable cause they need to conduct the rest of their investigation.
Right.
If you say no, you may have incriminated yourself if it turns out later that the rest of the test appear to make it more likely than not that you were impaired while you're driving. So then you have what appears to be, lying or trying to hide evidence. But maybe there's a third path where you say, why? Am I under arrest? What happens then? Well, no, I need some time to conduct an investigation, blah, blah, blah. So you go from there, and they ask you, well, would you be willing to take a breathalyzer test? And you say, no, sir, no, ma'am, I wouldn't. Well, we're going to have to ask you to walk in this straight line. Respectfully, sir or ma'am, I'm not going to be able to do that. I'm not willing to do that at this time, and I kind of got to get going. Well, actually, there's a last test. I don't even know how to spell it, but it's something with an
Nystagmus.
Nystagmus? Nystagmus. Is that like a Greek word or a Greek god or something? Nystagmus. Follow the pen.
Horizontal Nystagmus test.
The horizontal Nystagmus test.
Yeah.
So if you refuse that, they can say due to the smell of alcohol and the color of your eyes or something like that, that they still believe they had enough, probable cause, or in traffic stops, is there also reasonable articulable suspicion, or is that a different standard that doesn't apply for the traffic stops?
No, you're thinking of like a Terry stop, right? If they're,
Terry
I mean,
stop.
So that,
I know the Terry versus Ohio or whatever the case was.
Right. So, the reasonable suspicion is somebody, the taillight's out. There you go.
Okay,
now they have,
suspicion there.
Right, there you go. So now that's cause to pull somebody over.
Yeah.
Right. Blue stop sign. Slightly went over the lane. As silly as it is, still reason to pull someone over.
So that's more of the Terry stop part you're talking about.
Yes.
Reasonable articulable suspicion, but then they need probable cause to make an arrest.
Yes.
Okay, I'm just trying to refresh my recollection from criminal investigations back at John Marshall.
Yes.
So anyhow, all right. So in the best case scenario, you refuse the test and they arrest you based on the smell of alcohol, and the color of your eyes, if they've been red or something, which all the people listening out there, if you look in the mirror and your eyes are red and you know you've been drinking, you probably smell like booze and you probably shouldn't be driving. So again, stimulate your local economy with an Uber driver or a trusted designated driver. Maybe you walk your ass home because you need some exercise. But anyway, so it would be tougher for the state to prove their case against you if all they had was just, we thought we smelled alcohol and their eyes were red when we observed them in the field.
Yep, it would be tough.
But as we know, the will of people under the pressure of a police investigation is usually not going to be such that they handle it very calmly and they refuse all tests. But even if they refused all tests, they're still going to be charged with a refusal to comply with the...
No, that's not a charge in itself.
I thought refusal to blow on the breathalyzer.
Nope.
I didn't know that self was a refusal to blow, and that's a misdemeanor or something.
No, that's not a charge in itself. So, like I said, if you refuse to blow and you refuse to do these standard field sobriety tests, the officer, in his discretion, still make the decision to arrest you because he or she believes you are under the influence of alcohol. But there's no separate ticket or charge for refusing either the breathalyzer or the test. I mean, they'll literally just write on your paperwork, refuse breathalyzer, refuse standard sobriety test, and it'll be in the police report. That's it.
And so it's still an arrest for driving under the influence or driving intoxicated.
Right. So there's no separate offense for not complying.
I always thought there was. And I think
No.
some states do have a separate charge. Is that right?
I'm
not that it really matters for us because we're in Illinois, but I think
maybe
some
they
states
do.
But... Yeah. Well, okay, so you get stopped, and then in the worst case scenario, you say, yes, I have been drinking. All right, I'm going to ask you to step out of the car. A lot of people don't know that when a police officer asks you to get out of a vehicle, that is lawful, and they do have authority to ask you to do that in order to perform their police duties. It's a necessary thing that they have to do in order to properly investigate whether there's criminal activity going on. So just so you guys know out there, if they ask you to step out of the vehicle, make sure you do. And if you have anything in the car that you shouldn't have, that's always the question I've heard from police. Do you have anything in the car you shouldn't have? Well, sir, that's a really broad category. I might have another woman's panties in there, but that's not criminal. But it would get me. It would get a lot of people in the doghouse, right? So what do you mean shouldn't have? Could you be a little more specific, ma'am? Could you be a little more specific, sir? So yeah, they ask you if you have some. Make sure if you have anything that you want to remain private, keep it in a closed area or keep it in your trunk, because if it's out in plain sight, you're going to get in trouble for that too.
Right, and I mean. The criminal defense attorney in me would obviously say, don't incriminate yourself. Don't tell them that you have that, Glock 19 under the seat, because then now you have a brand new charge that, I don't even want to get into now. But now you opened up the can for a whole bunch of more charges.
Oh, look what we have here, a Glock 19 receipt. You forgot to mention it. Sir, I must have forgot. Like when I was packing my luggage that day, I forgot I had it under the seat of my car. I just left it there.
Or I borrowed the car to my brother and I just got it back. That must be his, right?
Could be. I don't know. I'd like to think my brother's a good guy, but who knows? Maybe he'd leave his Glock 19 under my seat one day.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I wish he'd at least give me a heads up.
Right.
But yeah, so you get pulled over. You say you've been drinking, and so then they ask you if you're going to take a breathalyzer test. If you do that and you fail because you're under the legal, or you're over the legal limit of 0.08, or if you're right at 0.08, you have to go over that limit. You have to exceed that, right? If you just 0.08, you're not, and that's not an arrestable level.
And I've seen some reports where literally they'll do the breathalyzer and it's a high number and they're like, all right, that's it, investigation done, going to the station, right? But then I've also seen one where they do where they will do it. However, they'll still want to do the standard field sobriety test just to still be safe.
Extra evidence.
Right.
So they're trying to build a slam dunk case for the state.
Right. So it really depends. Now, The one that they have on scene is called the PBT. There is case law that those are not reliable and that they cannot be used against the person. However, when they get to the station, that's where they have, they'll have them take this breathalyzer as well. Okay, so first they'll do like an initial, the PBT.
Portable breathalyzer test or whatever it's called.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they'll do that, and if that's high, again, it really depends on what police department we're dealing with.
Right.
But usually when they take them right away to the station, it's done. There's like a 20-minute observation period that they have to do before they do the official breathalyzer one. So it's not like they just get to the station and just right away. There has to be like an observation of the person in custody period.
Okay.
Yeah.
So so let's say, for example, then the person didn't take the breathalyzer, but they do comply with doing the field sobriety test, including walking a straight line. Then the Karate Kid, like 1 foot standing thing that's hard for anybody to do unless they have like their, ninja training or whatever, their Karate Kid training. Then if they don't do well on those, according to the officer's observations, they can make an arrest on that, or do they move to the horizontal thing as well?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, no, for the most part, they do all three.
Okay.
They usually do all three, but, just depends on the officer, but yes, they do.
And so you mentioned the Miranda Rights earlier. First of all, let's tell people what they are. You've heard probably on cops,
Law and Order.
or Law and Order. And I can't remember, I think, the first few words. The Miranda Rights, it starts off something like, you're under arrest, you have the right to remain silent, anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law, you have the right to an attorney, and if you can't afford one will be appointed to you.
Yes, beautiful.
Which is where you come into play as a public defender. If you can't afford an attorney, one will be appointed to you.
Yes.
And if you're lucky enough, you'll get Claudia Bertacchi.
Thank you.
So yes, and that is what they call, I believe, a procedural safeguard under the Constitution, to let you know that the words that you're going to use now will be used as an admission or evidence against you in the court of law. And that's why it's very important to, when you're dealing with figures of authority, or police officers who have the power of law, is to, let them prove their case. You don't need to admit criminal activity, because some people, they'd admit to just about anything when they're nervous because they're scared to say, oh, yeah, you know what, I did have a couple drinks tonight. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, or, yeah, I drank a 12-pack.
Well, just so we're clear, when they stop you for a traffic stop,
Right.
the officer doesn't have to give them Miranda rights right away, okay?
Right.
So they're investigating a traffic stop. Same thing, let's just say it wasn't a traffic stop, and it's like a foot pursuit or whatever. They're trying to do a field interview or whatnot. They're investigating. They are allowed to ask certain questions at that point. Okay. Now they take someone back to the station and want to begin questioning them. That's where Miranda warnings come in. And again.
So it's only when you're back at the station that you get your Miranda warning.
Right. It's whenever, yes. So people think that, okay, well, technically, I mean, see, there's an argument to be made because I have done a motion, okay, we're just slightly off topic. Let me just tell you this real quick. I did have a felony case. It was an aggravated unlawful use of a weapon. Long story short, the guy had a valid FOID card, did not have his concealed carry. It was a investigatory traffic stop, and the officer said, well, do you have any weapons on you? And my guy was like, yeah, there's, 2 guns on the seat right here. And there was 2 guns on the seat right there. So I did a motion to quash arrest and suppress the statement. To mine, I was actually surprised. I won that motion. Okay, and in the judge's ruling, he agreed that for all purposes, the defendant was technically in custody. He was not a threat to the officers. He didn't even have the gun on him. I mean, it was right next to him. But I think it was like under his bag, so it wasn't like plainly visible. And the judge ruled, he's like, no, he should have had Miranda warnings. So But that's just one judge, right? But then I've also seen other judges, same fact pattern, literally very similar fact pattern, say absolutely not. The police had every right to ask if he had weapons, and there was a weapon, So it depends on what judge you get, too. I hate to say that. I mean, that's why we have appellate court. That's why we have a Supreme Court, because when you have all these differing opinions, well, it's got to be challenged somehow, right? So even though, that's why I'm saying, like we said the thing in the beginning, this is not meant to be legal advice, because what has worked for one client may not work for the next, right? What one judge has ruled, another judge may not rule, right? So, what one state's attorney failed to argue, right, to prove their case, another state's attorney was able to argue much better, right? So there's just so many different factors to consider when being able to successfully defend not just a DUI case, just any criminal case, I would say.
Yeah, and so the issue there, or the issues that come into play, are the judge's interpretation of the law based on the facts presented, and then the facts presented themselves.
Right.
A change of a detail or two, and you might have a different ruling, even from the same judge.
Right.
So, like I say, it's been a while since law school. The Miranda warnings, I can't remember if they come from the 4th, 5th, or 6th Amendment. Do you know off the top of your head having to do these motions? Or no?
That's the 5th Amendment.
5th Amendment, yeah, right against self-incrimination.
Yes.
And so in order to, it's interesting because in order to protect your rights, they require arresting officers to give you those, to notify your rights, where there's a lot of cases where, no notice or something like that of the law is not an excuse, and they're not going to let you off with that. But I guess when it's time to make the arrest, you have to give those that procedural warning, the procedural safeguard to the citizen that they do have the right not to incriminate themselves, and they have the right to an attorney as well.
When they start questioning them after they're in custody.
Okay, so
Right.
So yeah, once you're in custody,
Right.
yeah, in the field they can ask whatever they'd like.
Yeah.
And then if they make an arrest, then they can try to perfect or complete their investigation then
At the station.
Yeah, at the station
Right.
by
So
questioning.
it's not like in the movies where you see, it's all dramatic and they're cuffing someone and they're putting them in the car, and as they put them in the car, you have the right to remain silent, and then, credits appear. That's not how it usually happens.
You're right. Yeah, it's so typical. Another thing I love about the Law and Order is they'll get arrested and the next day they're on trial already. Somehow the trial, it's I think it takes a little bit longer than that in real life to get into the trial.
And then a 60-minute episode.
Yeah, literally they get arrested in the first scene or something, and then the next day they're not even doing hearings or whatever. They'll barely show a hearing for a second, and the next day after that they're on trial. It's oh my god, what court system are you guys in? Is that New York? Because I don't think it moves that quickly there.
Right.
But
right.
All right. Well, we covered the traffic stop pretty well, and we also covered that you're entitled to your Miranda rights under the 5th Amendment, right against self-incrimination, and also your right to attorney. Which is that 5th Amendment too, or is that 6th? They kind of combine.
That's the 6th.
Okay, yeah. So 5th and 6th Amendments of the Constitution. Thank you, Founding Fathers, for deciding to give us a Bill of Rights. We really need them. Not that the government really respects them all the time, especially during COVID. They basically have YouTube and Facebook and Twitter working for them right now or whatever. But we'll talk about that on another episode. But anyway, yeah, you have these rights from the 5th and 6th Amendment, and you're warned about those once you're back in custody and they're starting to interrogate you at the police station. Is it police officers that do the interrogation, or they bring detectives in for that, or maybe both? Do you know how that works?
It could be both, but detectives. It's usually the officer that
did the arrest
at the stop. Unless it's something more serious, and that's what I wanted to get into, the consequence portion. Okay, because these are just assuming. Okay, now you blew a stop sign or your taillight was out. Okay, nobody's hurt, right? Well, still a DUI. Nobody has to get hurt for it to be a DUI, right? But now we have to talk about when there's actual severe consequences, okay, such as killing someone, right? When you are driving under the influence and you crash into someone and now there's a death, right? So it could, there's a reckless homicide right here. That obviously has a lot of consequences. That is a felony, right? Death results in the death of a person. And you don't even have to have the intent to kill them, right? So it's not like, of course, no one is intending to kill, right?
Even though you didn't plan for the consequences,
right,
you voluntarily entered the act.
Right. So, with drinking, now your defense cannot be, no, I didn't intend to kill someone. You killed someone. That's a reckless homicide. You're going to have to deal with the consequences now of that, right? Even if you don't kill someone, I know I gave just such a dramatic example right there. But even if you don't kill anybody... Physical harm,
property damage.
It could be property damage, but it could also be your reputation. You could get fired from your job. I know as attorneys, right, we could get in trouble. I don't even know... Our license could be suspended, our law license, actually. Depending how severe the case is, maybe we could even be disbarred. I mean, it's happened, right? So there are severe consequences to drinking and driving. It's just not worth it. It's not worth it at all. I mean, it's just so easy now to take an Uber, take a Lyft, that there really is no excuse. There really, really is no excuse. I know when I used to go out with my friends, back in high school, college, commercial, I should say, there was always one of us that did not drink. We always had a designated driver all the time. And it was funny because we would literally take turns. Okay, so this weekend I'm the designated driver. Okay, I'm in charge of everybody this weekend. Then another weekend it was another friend. So we had this system where, we would have one person who was completely sober. And we needed that. And I think it's a shame that not everyone has that group of friends where you can have that one person that can just go out and have a good time without drinking.
Well, right? Yeah, we used to take turns too back in the day.
Right,
so you always hated it when it was your week. Like, right. I'm going to see you dancing with the girls and drinking and having a good time. Me standing there all sober.
Right,
trying to have a good time, trying to be fun, trying to be cool. You're not loosened up because you haven't been drinking.
Right.
Well, what are you going to do? They have to accept you for who you are, even if you're sober.
Right.
So we'll get, I guess, probably more into how it all plays out in court and all that once you've had an unsuccessful traffic stop. But what else you got there on the list? I know we mentioned narcotics, I think, as well as alcohol.
So another thing people don't know is you don't actually have to be driving. Okay? What? So let's say now, all right, you drove a block after the bar and you're like, whoa, I should not be driving. Not good. Let me pull over. Let me sleep in my car. Let me sleep it off. Whatever. Big mistake. Big mistake. What you should do is you should definitely pull over, leave your car parked legally somewhere, and call an Uber and go back the next day. That's literally what you should do. Absolutely under no circumstances should you fall asleep in your car. Because here's the problem. The court has ruled that even if you're passed out in the back seat of your car, okay, the keys are not even in the ignition, okay? The keys are on you in your pocket or whatever, and you're snoring in the back seat, you're still in control of the vehicle, okay? And you can still get arrested for a DUI, That's actually a case I have right now. One of my clients, her and her friend both asleep in the vehicle. They're parked legally parked, not legally parked. And they were asleep. But then, they're both under the influence, and then mine was under the influence, and then at the station she blew a really high number too, right? But she's in control of the vehicle, even though she's asleep, okay? I understand it's a really silly law, but that's what the law is. So you don't have to actually be driving whatsoever, okay?
Well, that's a good scenario to point out, because people might think that they're doing the right thing, they're being responsible. Hey, I recognize I shouldn't be drinking. I'm going to pull over and relax for a while and sleep this off.
Right.
Don't do it in your own car.
Right.
Get your friend to pick you up, or get a hotel, or get an Uber, or do something.
Right.
But you're not entitled to sleep in your own car when you're drunk and you have control over the vehicle.
Right. Right. And then now if it's private property, that's a different story now. Because
like if you're in your driveway you're talking about?
Right. If you're like on private property, like in your driveway, then there's a whole, other set of laws for that. But again, you can't just pull into like a random McDonald's parking lot because they could always call the police on you. There was actually one case. It wasn't my case. It was one of my colleagues. Somebody fell asleep in the White Castle drive-thru, like their car. Fell asleep.
Yeah.
He got a not guilty. He got not guilty. He got a not guilty on the DUI, but literally asleep in the line for White Castle.
You got to be intoxicated to eat White Castle anyway, so guilty is charged on that one.
Right. So I'm telling you, it really depends on your fact pattern and the judge that you're in front of. It's
funny. The judge to be looking at White Castle. Well, that's evidence of intoxication in and of itself. I seen Harold and Kumar go to White Castle. I know they were tore up.
Yeah, that was a crazy one. That was a real crazy one. My first jury trial, I'll never forget it. It was an A1 DUI, so there was a breathalyzer. And I remember just as I was about to set it for jury trial, the judge, who was not the presiding judge over the trial, because in Maywood, the way it works is like every month you had a different judge in the misdemeanor rotation. So I won't name this judge's name, but I appeared in front of the judge, and I was, setting it for a trial date. And I remember she made the rudest comment to me. She was like, an A1 DUI, Ms. Bertacchi? Good luck beating that.
Did she say your name correctly, or did I pronounce it wrong?
It's Bertacchi.
It's Bertacchi. I thought it was Bertacchi.
No, so in Spanish.
Why didn't you tell me that months ago or a year or two ago?
That. So the CHI in Spanish is a chi, right? Yeah. In Italian, CHI is like a k sound, like K.
Like K.
Yeah,
okay.
Ki. So Bertacchi.
Bertacchi. Yes. All right.
Okay. So anyway, she's just
So we have to redo the intro now.
So she's like, "Good luck beating this. I don't know how you're gonna do that." And fair enough, right? But I knew the scenario in my head. I'm like, oh, just wait till everyone sees this victory I'm gonna have. Because you see an A1 DUI, and you're like, you're taking this to jury trial? Like, are you out of your mind? Good luck challenging it, right? But there is a challenge to it. What do you think the challenge is to beating an A1 DUI?
Well, if that judge ended up being the trial judge and they've already kind of rendered an opinion on the case.
No, she wasn't.
All right. Well, then we'll take that out of there. Perhaps the machine wasn't working properly on the breathalyzer, or the officer who used the breathalyzer machine or administered the test wasn't familiar with how to do it, or it was their first time, or I don't know.
Well, no.
Hit us with the legal magic.
That is right, but that's not what happened in this case. But those are possible defenses. But in this case, she wasn't driving. So you're like, well, how'd she get arrested for DUI if she really wasn't driving? So this is what happened. It's actually a very sad case. So I represented, she was a real young woman. I think she was like 22 or something when this happened. Long story short, she went out with her friends one night and her boyfriend at the time. And she got very drunk at the bar. And so drunk she couldn't drive. She didn't drive. So her good-for-nothing boyfriend, ex-boyfriend at the time of trial, of course, he takes the keys and he's not fit to drive either, okay? So he drives her vehicle, crashes her vehicle in Elmwood Park, okay? Crashes it into a bunch of parked cars. Luckily, it was no accident with a live moving car. It was crashed into a bunch of parked cars.
Yeah.
Okay, someone hears this big bang, calls 911. He takes off running. Okay, right, some man, right? So he takes off running. My client is in the front passenger seat. Passed out. She has no pants on. Okay.
Jesus.
And the police show up, and that's exactly how they found her, passed out in the passenger seats. But again, she's in control of the vehicle. okay? Even though she's in the passenger seat, passed out with no pants on, she's in control of the vehicle, right? So they arrest her. She's, very compliant. She does the breathalyzer. She was very drunk. So we go to trial, and the boy, but by the way, the boyfriend, ex-boyfriend was nowhere to be found, okay? So we go to trial, and that was the theory of the case, that she was not driving. And instead of the officer conducting probably what should have been a sexual assault investigation, because she's intoxicated, she cannot consent, and she had no pants on at all, right? And this was like winter time. She had no pants on, and instead of like figuring out what happened to this woman, because clearly something happened to her, they arrested her for the DUI. So the jury didn't like that. They did not like the work of how the Elmwood Park police officer handled that case at all. It was very sloppy. But, I really did believe my client that is exactly what happened. She had no criminal history. And that's how I was able to convince 12 people that she was not the driver, right? And it's funny because at the end, the jurors give feedback to the lawyers. And they told us, they're like, yeah, without a doubt, we knew she was drunk because that was never the issue in the case. We stipulated that she was drunk. But they're like, there's not 1 minute or second that we thought she drove. There's no way she could have drove because they were all the way in Wicker Park. And for how drunk she was, there is no way she could drive that car from Wicker Park all the way to where she crashed in Elmwood Park. Okay, that was the theory that the state was trying to prove, that she drove the car and crashed in Elmwood Park. That's not possible, not with how drunk she was, and how she was found. So that is probably the best defense, is you literally were not driving.
Yeah, in order to have driving under the influence, you have to be driving.
Right.
So,
right.
So then that kind of...
Well, not driving. You have to be in control. So in all technicality, I guess the arrest was a valid arrest because she was in the vehicle alone, but just because you're arrested, again, doesn't mean you're guilty, right? But I believe that that officer, at least there was probable cause to arrest her because the law is written that way, that she's in control of her vehicle even though she's blackout drunk, right? And she's in the passenger side, not even the back seat, not even the front seat, the passenger side, passed out.
So given the facts of the case, the jury decided that she wasn't guilty of driving under the influence.
Yes.
So do you feel in that case that the state, or there are enough facts to meet the elements of the law, because perhaps they're pretty broad, right? Like you said, you're in control of the vehicle, and obviously, like for a normal person standard, like non-attorney, right, it's really hard to say she's in control of a vehicle. And there was a lot of facts there that seems to show, first of all, she's lucky she wasn't harmed by this guy crashing into the cars.
Right.
Then she's in the vehicle, passed out, pantsless, and left alone.
Right.
So you would think they'd be, thinking more in terms of rendering aid and investigating a crime that somebody else committed against her, as opposed to charging her with a crime.
Right, and that's what the jury didn't like, especially, too. Because they definitely thought she was a victim of some crime that could have happened, So, that was my very first jury trial I did.
So, in this case, let's say all the elements of the law were met. It's just the jury's decision was that to not find her guilty of a crime.
Right, because it didn't add up. I mean, nobody saw her drive. If you had someone, let's just say for argument's sake, there was some witness that said, no, I saw a woman driving the car, and I then saw her open up the door and go to the passengers, like something like that. Yeah. All right, that's a different story now. That's a different story. There was nothing like that, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they kind of probably viewed her as just, more of a victim of a crime than somebody committing a crime.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Interesting stuff. Because it seems like under the letter of law, it'd be broad enough to try to perhaps convict her, which is what the state tried to do, but the jury is the last check on there. So,
yeah, be
good to your fellow human beings, because you never know when they might be a juror that has to decide something like that.
Right, exactly.
What else do you have?
Okay, so then, for alcohol, obviously, there's a lot more that we could talk about, but that's the gist of it that I want everyone to understand. And then because there's also the sobriety checkpoints. Those are legal too, right? So like right off expressways, sometimes they'll have a sobriety checkpoint set up. I don't know, for St. Patrick's Day weekend, maybe they have some set up somewhere around Illinois.
Right.
That has been found to be legal. So now you're not driving like bad at all, right? You're just, random stop. Now we're going to, pick every 10th car that comes through here. And that was proven to be illegal too. So then you'll have an issue with that you have to deal with. So those are the sobriety checkpoints. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, sobriety checkpoints. So as you mentioned, sometimes it could be near an expressway, or it could just be a certain point, a major thoroughfare or something. And the police will take certain cars and they'll ask them to pull over, sometimes even onto private property to, do a check for sobriety.
Right. So.
And so those are in general, they are legal. But there may be certain things that they do that could make them illegal. Right.
And I have not come across one of those cases yet, just so we're clear. The only ones I've come across have been ones where they're actual stops. Like, the officer finds a reason to stop them. It hasn't been the sobriety checkpoints. So it's not like, every weekend this is, there's all these people arrested because of these random checkpoints.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's an issue of whether the police have the resources to do it and this and that. And so in general, they're legal. And then did you say that choosing every 10th car is illegal, like just a random number, or no? Like, because if you're doing a field sobriety test, or a checkpoint, a sobriety checkpoint, what's the standard then for
I'm not entirely sure what standard they use. I just kind of made that part up, like, how it's random.
I understand you haven't had those cases before.
Right. So. I mean, obviously, they can't pull people over just based on race. We're going to pull over, every different, it has to be like some sort of system. It can't be like arbitrary like that. And I don't know what
perhaps the random, it could be random is like, you're the 5th car. Congratulations, you're a lucky winner. We're going to need you.
Something like that. Yeah. I think that'd be a question more for an officer. You have to have an officer here one day to get their perspective.
We'll see. I don't know how much they're at liberty to speak. And I know a lot of the officers that I talk to probably wouldn't have a lot of good things to say if they were being honest.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? Like about everything that's kind of going on right now, what they can and can't do, because they've been kind of, their hands are tied a lot.
Good point.
But, okay, so we have, the road sobriety, checkpoints.
Right.
What else do we have?
So, okay, now shifting over to A4 DUI. So A4 DUI is drugs. Okay.
Drugs.
So for an A4 DUI, you have to show that whatever drug you took has now impaired your driving.
Right.
Okay. Now, what's legal now? Marijuana, right? Okay, that's again, it's not like alcohol where it's like, okay, fine, smoke as much marijuana as you want. You've heard some people say, I drive better when I'm high. Okay, I'm sure you do, whatever. But you have to prove two things. One, that you in fact had marijuana or whatever drug, I'm just using marijuana as an example, in your system. But not only that, but it impaired your driving. Okay, so it's like a twofold test here. So a lot of times someone is, let's use my stop sign example, okay? Officer says blue stop sign. Okay, now he's gonna activate his sirens and pull the guy over, okay? Pulls the guy over, smells like Cheech and Chong in there, okay? So, have you been smoking? No, officer, I haven't. There's like a blunt that's just like all rolled up right next to her, half smoked, I should say. All right, because now it's right there in plain view. Step out of the vehicle, okay? So with drugs, there is a certain protocol that you have to go by, okay? So first of all, you have to be what's called a drug recognition expert, okay? It's like a special certification that officers would obtain, okay? Because there's like 12 different steps you have to go through. Now, with that being said, I still did a bench trial with a DUI A4, and the officer that pulled him over was not a certified drug recognition expert, and the judge still found him guilty. I appealed. I haven't heard back from the appeal yet, but again, don't rely on the law because every judge may not even follow it, you know? So we'll have to see if that ever comes back from appeal. But for the most part, they do have to be a drug recognition expert to render an opinion if somebody is under the influence of drugs.
And that's under Illinois statutory law?
Yes. So that's the first thing. Now, second thing is, did this, whatever they're under the influence of, impair their driving, okay? So when I say drugs, that literally is such a broad category. I had a case where a woman, she was on antidepressants, so, you know, narcotic.
Right.
And it was such a bogus case. This makes me so mad to stop. This was from Bellwood Police Department. I think, like, it was something silly, like no turn signal or something. Right. And like it was like 2:00 in the afternoon. Okay, it was something so silly, the actual stop. And they arrested her because they believed her to be under the influence of something, but she wasn't, you know. And I talked to her obviously, and she's the type of person that she has that, like, when she talks, it's like the slurred speech all the time, kind like that's.
So she's just got a bad hand of cards to play with.
Yeah, she does not. That's just the way she talks, right? But the officer didn't think that way, right? They thought, no, she's under the influence of something, right? Now, see, I never got to follow through with that case because then I got transferred to another assignment, you know. So I'm not actually sure what ended up happening with that case. But I have no doubt, I'm pretty sure one of my colleagues took that to trial because that's where we were at before I got my new assignment that I got. So yeah, I have seen cases like that where you're not even under, I mean, it's not a legal drug if that's your prescription, right?
Right.
But if an officer thinks that it's impairing your driving, yes, you can get arrested for driving under the influence of drugs. So if you have a valid prescription for Xanax, that's all good and dandy, but did it impair your driving? See, so that's the trick. That's why if you look at all the warning labels on these prescription drugs, right. So you have to you got to be careful. I mean, if you are on drugs like that, legally prescribed you, I should say, then you really have to think about, does this affect my ability to drive? Because if it does, then, you know, you're in trouble, right? So that's something that I think has to be a discussion with, you know, their doctor. What can you do if you have to drive for work? And, you know, because I think maybe like truck drivers or certain professions, like you can't be on any antidepressants or anything like that, you know? So it really is something that comes down to consulting with your doctor, because you can get arrested for it if it's impairing your driving.
You know, it's really interesting that we're talking about this today because a good friend of mine actually beat a DUI case for prescription drugs today.
Really? Wait, today? Like he had his trial?
The trial and was found not guilty today.
What courthouse?
I think it was out in Will County.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He was he had some medical, you know, issues that arose a couple years back, and they gave him some prescription medicine to help with that. And he was, at the time, he was trying to pass a truck. So he was going around the side, and I guess, you know, he wanted to give it some extra room. It was like a windy day or something. And his left tires went over the yellow line on the side of the road because he needed to allow a little extra room. I mean, there's a shoulder, but he had enough room where he's not, like, you know, going to go off a cliff or something if he, you know, veers off to the left. The officer pulled him over, and he says, you know why I pulled you over? And it was either, you know, improper lane usage or, like, you know, swerving or going beyond a traffic line or something. So he asked him to get out of the car, and he does these field sobriety tests and all this, and you know, I guess, I don't know if he did too well or what, but he didn't blow over the limit because he wasn't drinking.
Right.
You know, he had been going through some stuff, and he was on these, you know, he's on meds. He's friggin', the guy's probably tired. He's just trying to get home, whatever. So they charged him with DUI. I referred him to one of my friends, and he ended up, after all this time, and it was stressing him out so much too, because another thing that we didn't even touch on, and we'll get on into in a minute, is there's travel restrictions too, I believe. for people who, I don't think you can leave the country if you're facing DUI charges. Is that right?
Well, if any charges, any criminal, you have to get. Oh yeah, you have to get court to leave the state. First of all, let alone the country, you need a court order to leave the jurisdiction.
Yeah.
So if let's say you have an upcoming vacation, you had it planned, you can still go if the judge grants you permission and gives you the court order to go. If the judge is like, no, sorry, you're not going. Sorry, cancel your plans to Florida, wherever you're going. So it depends on the judge. On the judge. You cannot. Yeah, you can't leave the country or the states. You need without permission from the judge to do so.
Well, congrats to my guy. If I had ever heard a case that should have been dismissed much sooner, or perhaps even no arrest made at all, that would have been it. So I'm really happy for him. I know it's causing him a lot of personal stress, and I think that he'll be able to focus on Ford much better now. So yes, he did, and he was concerned because of the way it was dragging out. He thought that it would have been, there might have been a motion to dismiss sooner or something, or some kind of summary judgment motion. But do they have summary judgment in criminal law?
No, that's civil.
Oh, that's only civil.
So I guess the equivalent would be a motion to dismiss.
Motion to dismiss, yeah.
Yeah. There's no summary judge yet.
Yeah, because he was thinking it would have gotten taken care of sooner and it wouldn't have dragged out this long. But now that it's done, this guy, I think he's going to be a new him. So good for him. It's a fresh start for him. So, which is the name of his, it's like a business he has. Whatever. We'll talk about that another time.
Yeah.
So all right. So subsection A4 of the law on traffic, DUI arrest or operating while intoxicated is drugs.
Drugs, yes.
Is there anything else you wanted to add on the drug part of it?
Absolutely do not sit in your car and smoke weed because you're in control of your vehicle, okay? Again, even if you're parked in the alley, all right, behind your house, if you're even sticking out a little, you're still on the public way, that you can't sit in your vehicle and smoke weed. Okay, so that's a mistake people make all the time. But DUI cases aside, the smell of cannabis is literally like the probable cause to further an investigation. Okay, for anything, for a lot of cases. So for example, okay, now guy blew a stop sign. All right, we gotta pull him over. Pulls over, rolls down the window. Officer smells weed. All right, now you smell weed. Now we gotta do an investigation. Okay, you have any illegal drugs in the car? Anything illegal in the car? Oh yes, I got the Glock 19 right here. Okay, now you see how it goes from a simple stop sign, okay, all the way to this now. So I can't tell you how many times I always see it, the smell of cannabis. Now, it could be very well that, they smoked 5 days ago, right? Because the smell lingers. So it literally could have been more than 5 days ago. I'm not saying it was fresh, but that smell that lingers, it's always an excuse for the officer to further the investigation. The smell of cannabis, fresh cannabis it smelled like, and that always furthers the investigation. So my one advice to people would be, for the love of God, please do not smoke in the car, because it's just, your car's going to stink, number one. Number two, the smell's not going to go away. And three, if you are ever pulled over, well, you, without even saying anything, you just gave the police officer probable cause to move forward with their investigation. So it's just, you can avoid all that by just, go in your basement and smoke. Go outside, right? Don't smoke in your car.
I hear you. You have to tell all those people out there, they get so comfortable in their car, they're chilling, they got the radio on, they're just doing a peaceful activity with their friends. This is wrong. You're a criminal.
Right.
Get out of your car. You can't smoke weed in there.
It's so funny.
Yeah.
So, do you want to touch on anything else, or do you want me to end on my personal anecdote?
Tell us about your personal anecdote.
Yeah. Okay, so personal anecdote type. Okay. For me, DUIs have always been, sort of personal, but with the nature of my job, I can't pick and choose, obviously, who I want to defend. Whoever comes in, obviously we take whoever comes in. Doesn't matter the nature of the crime. It could be no matter how serious, I should say.
Right.
So when I was in law school, it was a summer that I was studying for the bar exam. So what a great summer that was. It was not a great summer. So the summer that I was studying for the bar exam, this is the summer of 2014. I'll never forget the day. It was Father's Day, and I was with my son, and we were coming home. We were coming home from a restaurant. It was just me and him in the car. And at the time, I had a Lexus SUV. So it was, nice, big, beautiful car, or SUV, I should say. And we were driving on Cumberland. So you're familiar with Cumberland?
It's up by O'Hare Airport on the north side.
Yes. So Cumberland is 4 lanes total, okay? So 2 lanes south, 2 lanes north. And then there's like the divider in the middle. So I'm not a fast driver by any means. For the most part, I'm the driver all the way on the right side on the expressway that you're passing by. That's me.
You're
okay?
going too fast behind me. Just go around.
That's me, okay? So, I was driving my usual, normal self. Speed limit, 25 miles, 30 miles per hour. And, this is Father's Day at like 7 o'clock at night. So there's obviously still sunlight out, beautiful sunny day. And there wasn't a lot of people on the road at all. There was like very few cars. So I'm driving and then literally going straight, and then out of nowhere, it was literally like he fell from the sky. A car, he had a Hyundai Sonata, which piece of junk car those, seriously. He had a Hyundai Sonata, and I'll tell you why in a second. He had a Hyundai Sonata. He was coming, and he turned in the wrong way. Right. So I was going southbound, right, in my southbound lane, and he turned into the southbound lane going northbound.
At you, yeah.
So it was a head-on collision.
With you?
With me, yes. Yes, he literally, it's like he zoomed in out of nowhere and just...
Wow.
So both cars were totaled. My beautiful, huge SUV was totaled. His car looked like... How could anyone survive that accident? That's how it looked like, right? I mean, that's what I'm saying. The Sonata is a piece of junk. And I remember the investigator after this is like, what saved your life is that SUV. And I believe it to this day. And ever since that day,
crazy.
I always bought SUVs. So anyways, this was like an old Polish guy, drunk out of his mind. And this is all from what I gathered in the police report. He like ran into the forest preserve, and somebody had to go find him and like tackle him. Jesus. So it was a huge mess. I just remember it was very traumatic, and my son was younger at the time, but we didn't have any broken bones, but we had a lot of bruising, obviously, and because we had our seatbelts on, so you get the bruise from the seatbelts.
Yeah.
But aside from the bruising, like the PTSD that comes with that, I mean, it was a very traumatic experience for me. And I remember it took me a good 6 months until I actually started to drive again. So for 6 months, I rode my bike everywhere. And I relied on like my dad, who was like literally the only other person I trust driving is my dad. He's a great driver. So I would only go in a car with my dad. I would not get in a car with anyone else. So I had like really, really bad PTSD from this. And then I finally, learned to drive again. But yeah, it was very traumatic. And, the point in this is that by the grace of God, nothing happened to any of us, right? Not to the driver, not to me, and not to my son. So I really think there was a guardian angel looking out for me that day. But unfortunately, that's not the case for everybody, right? I mean, drunk drivers kill so many each year. I mean, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but they kill themselves, they kill others. I mean, you're driving down any given street, you'll see like a memorial, like in memory of so and so, don't drink and drive.
Sometimes you don't even notice them, but you'll see like a cross here or there, like strung up to a light post or or whatnot. Yeah.
But you see, like, the signs that say, like, don't drink and drive in memory of, and then they'll say the person. Right.
I've seen, even in Wisconsin, you'll see highway dedications to the person's name who has been killed, you know?
Right. So, you know, a lot of people always like to focus on, you know, oh, these dangerous weapons, you know. Oh, a gun is such a dangerous weapon. Yeah, a gun in the arms of the wrong person, in the hands of a wrong person is a very dangerous weapon, right? And the same goes for a vehicle,
That's true.
right? A vehicle, a person that should not be driving, right, can do more damage with the vehicle than, you know, a Glock 19 can do, right? There's been entire families, a minivan of a whole family killed because of a drunk driver. Right, so I don't understand why we're not looking at vehicles as deadly weapons, because they really can be deadly weapons. They are. And I think that's also the reason where, you know, driving is not a right. It's a privilege. It is definitely a privilege to be able to drive. It is not a right. You don't get that, you know, constitutional right to drive. It's ironic, though, because you got a constitutional right to bear arms.
They didn't have cars when the Constitution was written, but it's, you know.
No, I know that. Well, they didn't have computers when the First Amendment was written either, you know. But you get my point. I'm trying to say is that, you know, it is very destructive when someone who should not be driving gets behind.
Can you imagine, like, friggin', like, Benjamin Franklin? You shall have the right to drive like a free person in America. And we're going to put that in there as...
right, you know, right to own a horse.
Keep on rocking in the free world. Do-do-do-do-do. Keep on rocking in the free world. And we know, Benjamin Franklin, that you would have probably been supported the right to drive.
Right.
Just not the right to drive while you're intoxicated. Because apparently that guy was a booze hound back in the day, too. He was notorious for that shit.
Was he?
He was like the life of the party. He's a drunk guy. Like,
right.
Can you see Benjamin Franklin with his old spectacles on and like a friggin' like booze mug in each hand? You know, the ones with the handle, but it's a big clear glass. Like friggin' Dua Lipa on and shit. This guy's doing his levitating dance over there. Like, apparently he was like the life of the party and a real ladies' man too. Well, they actually called him a womanizer, but who knows? You know what I mean? In any event, I guess ladies liked him and he liked the ladies.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting story, a very traumatic experience to have to go through, and it's not something you'd probably ever forget.
Right.
So that's so wild, and your son was all right too.
Right, and like I said, I mean, we're very lucky. We just honestly, it was luck, pure luck and grace of God that nothing happened to us, right? So, I mean, it's just, it's not worth it. It is not worth it. And, there, you know, people overdrink, I should say, for obviously a variety of reasons. You know, the best thing I can tell someone is that, you know, first of all, never let your friend leave alone, right? If you are out with friends and you see someone just getting way too drunk, you order them an Uber, you pretend to order them a drink, and then you know, because I've done this too, where like, oh, you know, bartender, let's get another round, and then it's actually water, and then you give it to the friend, right? You know, the friend that like refuses to stop drinking. Okay, well, here you go. Here's a margarita, and it's actually water. You know,
I tell them like tonic and lime with no alcohol in it, so they, you know what I mean?
So something like that to like confuse them, you know. But you know, you really. A lot of people are like, oh, well, I'm not babysitting my friends. Okay, well, I think we're at the age, well, at least I am, where I haven't seen anyone get like that in a very, very long time. But it is always important to look out for those that you are with, if you can. And if you're going out and you know where you're going, okay, so, hey, we're going to this networking event. There's going to be, you know, open bar for 4 hours or whatever.
Yeah. I
should probably Uber, you know. Or I'm going out to dinner, you know, it's my buddy's birthday. We're all going to have some drinks. It's kind of far, you know, it's in Oak Brook. Let me just Uber just in case.
That'd be a great area to Uber around over there.
Right. I'm just saying, like, you know, you have to think what you're going to do that night, okay? Unless you're absolutely certain that you're not going to drink at all, or just have one drink, you know, and you're totally fine. then, you know, that's your judgment call, right? But I mean, you really should pre-plan ahead. You should never be in a position where it's like, darn, I came all this way, I have my car, how am I going to get home? Then I'll have to Uber back, and then I'm going to have to come back in the morning for my car. You know, you never want to be in that position. You don't, you know, so why not just make your life easier and just pre-plan ahead of time?
Some people, unfortunately, have to learn the hard way, but when they do, they'll be saying the same thing that you just said, is it's not worth it. Get an Uber, you know,
right.
or a cab, or family or friends, somebody to come and get you. And I think a lot of people might not know is that, I mean, unless you're a really experienced drinker, which some of the people I know are around here on the south side, but most places will let you leave your car there. You just got to ask permission, tell them, hey, you know, I don't know if I'm a little under the weather right now.
Right.
I think it'd be a good idea if I left my car here for the night. Is that all right with you guys? And usually they're like, yeah, no problem. Come back and get it tomorrow, because they don't want a bad reputation either.
Right.
So, anyway, do you handle sentencing at all or no?
Do I?
Yeah. Like, as far as, do you represent, or are you there for a sentencing hearing or no?
Yeah, of course. So, with a Class 4 felony of an aggravated DUI, the sentence range is anywhere from 1 to 3 years. With a Class A misdemeanor DUI, that sentencing range is up to a year in jail. First-time DUI offenders with a valid license can get supervision. So supervision is not a conviction on your criminal record so long as you complete all the terms of your supervision, which usually involves like some classes that you have to take, like DUI classes, a victim impact panel where, you know, exactly what it sounds like. You attend a panel of people that were affected by drunk driving, you know, people maybe that lost their, you know, son or daughter to a drunk driver. So you got to listen to that panel. Usually there's some fines to pay, community service. So supervision is usually for like two years for the most part. And if you successfully complete everything, you don't have a criminal conviction for a DUI. But that DUI is still going to appear on your driving record, if that makes sense, okay? Yeah. And then that's between you and the Secretary of State.
And when you say between you and the Secretary of State, is like you could try to have it like sealed or expunged?
No, like because if you pick up now a second DUI, you know, because every time you pick up a DUI, then your license can get revoked, okay? Because there's a difference between the suspension and the revocation. Revocation actually involves like a formal hearing in front of the Secretary of State. So we don't handle
Revoked
anything like
is
that.
Like outright.
Right.
You've lost your license, whereas suspension is just temporary.
Right, but you would have to have the hearing to have it. Right.
They got to go through the formal process to make sure if we're going to make this important decision and consequences for you that you have a formal hearing.
Right. So we don't. Our office,
you're not touching any of that. No.
Right. Our office doesn't handle that, but so. It really depends on your background, if you could qualify for that supervision. If, like I said, if this is your first DUI, if it's a felony, sometimes the state's attorneys will make offers. Okay, let's see, maybe there's no crash. You literally just didn't have your license. We're going to reduce it to a misdemeanor, but now you're going to be on probation. It's still a conviction, but a Class A misdemeanor conviction for DUI is better at least than a felony conviction, okay? But, of course, not as good as getting the supervision, but you're not going to get that.
Supervision is the first time only.
No, well, supervision is, right, it's first time only, number one, and number two, it's for misdemeanors, and I'm not saying no state's attorney has never done it, but at least I haven't seen it yet, where they'll reduce it from a felony to a misdemeanor with supervision. That'll be your offer. Usually when they reduce it, they're like, we'll reduce it, but you're taking the conviction on your criminal record for a misdemeanor DUI conviction. So that's the difference. Like probation is an actual conviction on your criminal record. Supervision is not.
That's for second DUI, you're on probation?
No. If you didn't have your license, that's what I'm saying.
Oh,
that was the felony part.
License.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So then it's felony and.
Yes, and they can reduce it. The state's attorney can reduce
but they're
charges.
Going to take a conviction that's going to stay on the record for
Right. It
the
all
DUI.
comes down to the state's attorney's discretion. If they technically wanted to, they can reduce it to misdemeanor and offer supervision. I mean, that literally is their discretion. I just haven't seen them, at least the state's attorney in my room, do that yet. It's usually you have to take the conviction. Or I'm sorry, that's the offer, what it is, I should say.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is consequences. There's legal consequences. There's emotional consequences. And, I don't do this, not a private criminal defense attorney, but at least from the people that I know, I mean, they charge good money for this defense. So it's like one night that could have cost you, I don't know, $60 in an Uber, let's say, has now cost you like $6,000 in fees and legal fees and all of that, right? So it's like you really got to ask yourself, okay, I don't want to pay this much money for an Uber, but I sure as heck do not want to pay thousands and thousands of dollars to fight this case, right? So that's what it comes down to.
Is your job stressful?
Life is stressful. Yes. No, it's never a dull day. It's never a dull day. My job, it's not for everyone. Definitely is not for everyone. I give mad props to my colleagues that are mothers of young children. I can never do that. My son's older. He's a freshman in high school. So, I don't, although I feel like I'm his Uber driver for, between all his sports and friends and all this stuff, it's a lot different when you have to go home and, care for like a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old, you know what I mean? So, mad props to working mothers of young children, because I did it and I was younger. I had a lot more energy than I have now. But yeah, with my job, and I think with any attorney too, but I guess especially being, with the public defender's office, you always have to be able to think on your feet, right? Because it's always the unexpected that happens in court. Sometimes the state might throw you a curveball, the judge, your client could be acting up. You really have to prepare for anything that comes your way. And I think the best way I manage, at least, is one, I have a lot of dark humor. Okay, a lot of people don't have that, so I have a really dark, twisted humor that keeps me sane.
So you got the judges cracking up in there?
Well, no, it's just, if there's that saying, like, if you don't laugh at things, then you'll cry. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So like some things, I'll make jokes of things that are probably inappropriate to laugh about, but that's, I think a lot of criminal defense attorneys in general will only get something like that. But anyways, that's not just my coping mechanism. I try to always have a positive attitude, because in anything, not just in being an attorney, just anything in life, if you go in with a positive attitude, that changes everything, right? Like, I'm not going to let my client who, is having a temper tantrum affect my mood, right? Because I can't control his mood, but I can control my mood, right? So I'm not going to let his actions influence how I feel today. So that's number one, just to have a positive attitude. Time management is key, super key. You got to be organized. You really got to be on top of your things. My job is definitely not a profession for procrastinators, because there's deadlines to meet. You do have people sitting in custody. So remember, when you're in Cook County Jail, you're innocent. You're presumed innocent. You haven't been found
on trial,
guilty
you haven't
yet,
been convicted, so you're just hanging out there in jail. Yeah.
Right. And can you imagine, because of COVID, there was a whole stop on jury trials. So there's people in custody from like 2016 still waiting trial, which is ridiculous.
That's crazy.
They're presumed innocent.
I know, so much of their life gone and they haven't been to trial yet. That's why they're talking about like delayed justice is no justice.
Right.
You got to get these trials moving.
Right.
They couldn't have done Zoom earlier on in the pandemic for these people. Shit.
Right. Well, the thing is, a jury trial, you can't do that on Zoom. You got to be in person. You got to look at the witnesses in the face. The whole confrontation clause.
Jesus, yes, and COVID just, who would have thought that's just going to delay justice?
Right.
There's so much injustice with
so
COVID.
much. So you're constantly on your toes, and you're constantly dealing with really stressful situations. But again, there's, in the summertime, I love to ride my bike. That helps a lot, just going on the bike trail, being one with nature. That's what I like to do.
It's pretty cool.
My dog helps. I got a German Shepherd. He's I'm telling you, having a dog, it's a whole different world, man. I mean, that guy's always so happy to see me. It's like, no matter how bad of a day I had at the office, I come home, my dog's so happy. I'm like, everything's so much better now, So, that's how I deal with all the stresses of, my career.
Okay, well, yeah, I just asked because I feel terrible bringing you out here on a Friday evening to talk about work, but
that's okay.
For some people it's interesting, myself included.
Yeah.
I learned a lot this evening, and hope everybody out there did too. And it's just cool that you have something that's, you might not consider yourself an expert, but you're more of an expert than anybody I know. So
oh yeah, I am not an expert by any means in any of this.
But experience, though, in criminal law,
Right, but no, there are attorneys who've written actual books on this topic.
Yeah.
My whole purpose here, just so the viewers are clear, right? It's just to give an overview, a brief overview of what I've come across. Everybody could be different, but I think just to wrap up, what should be taken away from this is, one, you absolutely can refuse the breathalyzer. If you do, your license will be suspended for a year. You absolutely can refuse the standard field sobriety tests. And with that being said, refusal of both does not mean you won't get arrested. But if you are arrested, it will help your case. If you go to trial, it will definitely help your case because it'll be a very weak case then, right? So, keep those two things in mind. Even if you think you're absolutely fine to drive and there's no way you're above the legal limit and you've been doing this, since you were 16 and, whatever, all it takes is one time to get pulled over, right? I mean, the people that I've come across that have been stopped for DUIs, it's literally evenly male and female. It's not like all these men are getting stopped for DUI. It literally is like equal. I've had just as many female clients as I have male, so that has nothing to do with it. Young, very old, does not matter. The oldest guy I've had, he was, oh my gosh, God bless him. He was 80 years old, arrested for a DUI. So age is not a factor. Sex is not a factor. It could happen to anybody. Race doesn't matter. I've had a lot of white clients pulled over and charged with DUI, black clients, Hispanic clients. It's all across. It's all across. And, even though there's no crash, nobody gets hurt, doesn't mean there won't be consequences. So those are things to keep in mind. None of this is worth risking your career or your life over. Just get the Uber or the Lyft or a taxi, right? Do people still do taxis?
They still do taxis.
Or taxi, or the good old fashioned, here's my sober buddy for tonight, right?
Whichever one makes the most sense.
Right.
Do it. And, it's thank you so much for coming by after a long work week and kicking some knowledge to everybody. And it's really nice to be able to do it because, Putin invaded the Ukraine, and not everybody can speak freely and live without having to worry about bombs going off where they're living or where they're at. And so it makes it extra special to be doing stuff like this. So here's to freedom, and God bless the free people of the world. Keep on fighting. Stand up and fight. And, we'll stand up with you. And, eventually we will. So, in any event, I always end up on the note of, COVID is contagious. But so is happiness, motherfuckers. So.
Who was it that said beer is proof that God wants us to be happy?
I think it was Benjamin Franklin.
Was it? Yeah.
Beer is proof that there is a God and he loves us or something like that.
And he wants us to be happy. Amen to that.
So, happiness is contagious. And so I've gotten along with many different people in my life in different places, different races, different genders. And it was all because, I was personable and I started from a position of kindness and respect. And, just had a conversation with them and chatted with them. You've seen me do it in person at the restaurant and everything. It's all good. But, you know, so I encourage you guys to do it. I think that your life will be a better place and everybody else's life will be too. And it'll help make, you know, your community into the community you want it to be. You can't control, you know, if it's Trump or Biden necessarily. You can cast your vote. Might not make, you know, end of the day, there's nothing that you can really do about it. But you can control how you interact with other people, and good people make other people good. And so be good to yourself, be good to your family, be good to your community. Stay blessed. Thank you for tuning in, and tune in next time. Claudia and I love you.
And have a safe St. Patrick's Day.
Peace
right?
out. Be safe for St. Patty's Day. Be safe for St. Patty's Day, all. Enjoy them responsibly. And you'll find me out there on the warpath at these parades and these events for St. Patrick's Day. Happy St. Patrick's Day, y'all. Peace out.